Is your full name Daniel?
It is today.
Welcome to another episode of The Anatomy of the Climb. We are joined again with Dan Bell, and we are going to talk about a bunch of climbs this time. So we got a ton of submissions, which was amazing. We're obviously not going to get to all of them because we got way more than we expected, which is great. We'll get to them eventually, hopefully. Just as a heads up, these are just grades that we found on the internet, so they may not be like perfect, but who cares? Porkchop with Miguel Climbs. I love Porkchop. This climb is beautiful.
Cool.
I mean, this might be one of the most classic ones in Red Rock, right?
Yeah.
A lot of open hand on this. There is a purpose to be strong in the open hand as well, so don't neglect that open hand training.
Just a quick note, because this comes up all the time. You see when these little foot picks happen. It's hard to gauge if you don't do a lot of like layback style climbing, but most of this ends up coming about when he sort of gets a little bit ahead of himself. So basically, just with all climbing holds always, you want to be pulling directly through the hold. And so if you start to stand up a little bit too tall, you end up kind of pushing straight through the high foot, but you kind of disengage the low foot. And the same thing kind of happens with the hands as he gets kind of taller up. He's pulling still pretty well through the bottom hand, but the top hand starts to get like a little bit less engaged essentially. But yeah, this sort of crunched up position is just not super natural for a lot of people, and so you end up kind of trying to escape it, but when that happens, everything just kind of starts blowing off. Oh, actually, quick side note, because I don't want people to die too much, but don't do this. This happens a lot, especially when people have a number of kind of the smaller pads, and it just takes a while to get really practiced with, but like the last thing that you want to do is go through a pad hole. It's almost always better, unless you're on really massive boulders, to have a nice flat landing rather than a thick landing. So I would, if you're not in something that's like 20 plus feet, really prioritize coverage over depth.
Dusty Coffee with Jeff Lyman.
Well, the climb is Dusty Coffee. I was like, that's a great username.
Yeah, it kind of would be, right?
It's a questionable brew, but I'm into it. What do we got going on here?
Rehearsing.
Whap.
Pulling straight in, using the feet to push up.
Good kind of like scapular engagement and pull through, all just fairly pretty. But the only like small technical thing that I'd notice, I mean it works so it hardly matters, but I would normally use a higher left foot for this. Generally speaking, you're just not quite as coordinated coming out of like a little pedestal jump here where everything's on the same plane, and it kind of restricts you. I would personally, assuming that there's something available, which it looks like there may or may not be, I'd hoof a left foot up just a little higher so you're into kind of that like runner like split stance, and that tends to let you generate a bit further and a bit smoother. But again, this worked beautifully in this case. So
yeah, and then this is one just where I'll point out good ankle and hip mobility. I mean, you don't have to have amazing ankle and hip mobility to do that, but obviously if it's trash, that's going to be really quite limited in that position. But because it's good, he can basically perch right on that left foot, and then he can trust it, and he can just kind of search for where he wants his left hand, and then boom, just stands right up. If you want to work on hip mobility and ankle mobility, we have full videos on that, so definitely check those out. All right, so this is Welcome to Detroit with Natalie Gilmore. I love how Natalie just included the fail attempt here first, and then she does get it on the next one that she shows, and she looks a lot more solid. I'm curious, I mean, she's wearing more clothes in the second attempt, so is this the same season? Or did she just, was it a year later and she got stronger? But
look at that wind. She's just chilly.
Yeah, maybe it was just the next day and it was windier and it was just colder.
Quick note, the only thing that I kind of see coming off of the start here is kind of the same situation as Porkchop, which is as she sets the heel, she kind of sags to the right for a second, and then whoop, pulling along the hold, not through the hold. Off we go.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
On the second one here, she's pressing kind of straight through it with the foot, but as she sets the heel, she shifts immediately to the left, and it's a fairly small change, but with like kind of a big slopey rail like this, the difference between it being a jug and being totally unusable can be only sort of like a few degrees and a little bit of engagement. So yeah, always through the holds.
All right, we got the Pearl, another classic V5 with Amanda. And just kind of a heads up with this, we see Amanda later, or at least she submitted one later with her doing a harder, like a V10 climb. So this is, I wouldn't want to say like a walk in the park for her, but it's going to lead to one of my points later. But I mean, I've not actually tried this climb, but it seems pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's a good one.
A climb like this, say it's beneath your skill level, doing a mastery drill where you take something like 50, 75, or maybe a little bit higher of like your max skill level, and you try those different moves, you record yourself. Maybe there's one spot where you feel like it is a little more challenging, so you do different beta. You work on different technique and see if you can get that better. Like just because you sense something doesn't mean you can't improve upon it. And you don't have to record yourself. You can have friends say like,
your friends
hey, why
can
don't you
record
try
you, yeah.
this? Oh yeah, your friends can record you. You can all judge yourself together, you know?
You're exactly right. Like sometimes people will do climbs a little below their level that they can do solidly, which I think a lot of people kind of confuse with easily. And those in some ways are like the most prime targets for accidentally using harder beta than you need to. You know, you're like, oh, sick, smashed it. But it's really worth kind of, especially at gyms or if you're on longer trips outside, like things sort of towards the end of the warm-up circuit, where you can kind of just try a couple of different sequences or take the time before you try them initially to sort of, I try as just sort of like a rule of thumb to come up with sort of like 3 valid solutions. You can do more, you can do less, depends on the time and your kind of motivation, I suppose. But a lot of times you just spot something that ought to work, and especially if it's well within your grade, it probably will work, and you don't necessarily then continue looking to see if there's a better, easier, smoother option. So I think that's just like a place where it's challenging enough to test you, but easy enough that you have a bit of freedom where you really have the opportunity to kind of like learn and perfect not only the style, but like sort of the imagination around those moves.
Yeah. Vino, Rojo.
A regular part of my training these days.
Our V6 by Max. Let's watch this one, let it play through. I mean, purely canvassing here, right? Because we can't see the feet.
Yeah, anytime you can't see the feet, they're not
canvassing.
on. Yeah.
Sweet pinch there, undercling pinch, which is like also pretty cool. I think he puts that heel on at first, but changes it pretty quickly.
But look at this sneaky knee bar. Zerp. Well, maybe not.
I was gonna say, does he actually set it, or does he just push into it?
It's even cooler if he could have knee barred and chose not to.
It's an eliminate.
It's an eliminate now, yeah.
Is that throwing shade at Adam Andre right now?
I just wanted to look at just the pinch because I thought that was cool, and
lovely neutral wrist position.
And like I kind of have 2 points with this. It's just not something I hear about people training too much, where I do think it's a pretty helpful skill with climbing.
Yeah.
And even in this one in particular, like look at the direction that he's going to be pulling through that pinch. It's like straight through, and kind of what Dan's talking about then later. Watch where his right hand's going to go, especially now. Watch where he wants to pull next, straight up. So what is that? I mean, obviously the foot is helping him a lot, and that left foot is going to help pull up, but having that like pull through there is just going to help him get that next hold.
There's definitely a place for like bicep curls and variations in climbing. They're useful for a lot of things, but for the most part, it's not for rows. That's what people kind of tend to associate him with, but look at this position as his elbow drops. For the most part with these things, you're training basically rows. See, just So that's by and large how he's engaging like the larger musculature. Obviously squeeze the crap out of this thing, but then it's like row. It's not a bicep curl that's pushing you down away from the hold. It's a row.
Doing that row is more of a compound movement where you're teaching your body to engage, you know, your brachialis, the biceps, brachii, you know, and then but you're also including the rhomboids, and you're getting the lats involved. So it's a lot more global involvement rather than just, hey, let me isolate one group.
Exactly. I think both that bicep curls are good as like a sort of tier 3. You know, it's like if you've been able to do the bigger compound movements and you have a little time and energy and it fits your objectives, they're quite good. But the other thing is that I have no proof of this, but when I do them, I always do like easy bar curls. And part of that is because all of a sudden you get substantial posterior chain engagement. You know, as soon as it's forward and you have kind of both hands. One, you can kind of just like hang out. You know, it's just not enough weight. But by the time you have sort of like a whole bar and enough weight for 2 arms in front of you, there's a not insubstantial amount of kind of like posterior chain engagement. So I think that probably makes it a little more bang for your buck.
Also can eliminate some momentum there, but just remember, if you're doing bicep curls, don't just use momentum.
Yeah.
We have multiple people, I think, who are doing Angel Dyno on this. I mean, I think it's first Max, but I think there's like 2 or 3 people that do it on this one.
Yeah.
So we'll have all their names like listed up, so they're sharing too.
It's a climb with many options. I like that.
You know, that is true, and that's kind of the cool part about this little sequence is it does have a few different betas, different techniques. Then we have Kevin. All right, we do have all the names up here. Perfect. Does he use the intermediate on this one? Yeah, so he does use the crampier. Passat.
Yeah, zap. That's cool. Still a dyno.
Yeah. And then does he do this one similar or is it different? Let's see. On the crimp and then gonna throw up the left hand as well, yeah. Oh, but that was kind of cool. Uses that momentum to just carry through to the next one.
But that kind of ties back into what we were saying earlier about like perfect repeats and trying different things. You know, it's like all those ways work. For each person, one's going to be easiest. If you just smash it, you're never going to know. And so if you have the time and the holds are comfortable, it's worth kind of doing them a number of ways.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I try to be shifted towards the like top hand, I guess, the hand that's going to be doing the pulling. It's like most of these rules are like 80% maybe. You know?
Yeah.
So in this case, because it looks like he's really anchoring on this hand and kind of supporting on this hand, it makes a little bit of sense to be biased there. I think in a, perfect world, obviously, again, he smashes it. It's like you would want to be like this, and as you start generating, you would shift a little bit and kind of pull through. So he kind of just like keeps it like this and goes like, whap. Doing it that way will generate a little bit more momentum because you're kind of coming through yourself a little bit more and also be just a little weaker, a little bit more intense on the shoulder. Rows, pull-ups, like everything is just going to feel best kind of in here.
Right about
and as soon as
here.
you get into like way wide grip or you start doing like IYT kind of pulls, you're just a lot weaker out here. And so because you can't, for the most part, be closed on both hands at the same time, generally speaking, whichever hand you need to control more or need to have more kind of like strength and confidence through should be the one that you're closed in on.
Moving on to Marcel with Monkey Wrench V7. Good hip flexibility right off the bat. This is a cool looking climb. I think, are some of these up here, do you know, Dan, are these like kind of pockets?
No idea.
They
Somehow
look
I haven't
kind
climbed
of,
at Red Rocks that much.
They look kind of pockety, I think. Emil, any input? Not sure.
That one looks like a pocket.
Yeah, that one definitely looks like it, like a snowman.
Yeah, as you can see.
Isn't it right about here, the snowman pocket? It's not like this is something that I want to like be like, whoa, watch out, be really careful. This is like, disaster. Sometimes it's just the shoulder blade moves into the position that it needs to accomplish the position that you're in or to move off of that next hold. But you can see with this, like, as he loads through it a little bit more, that shoulder position doesn't change a whole lot, but that inferior angle, so the bottom part of that scapula does protrude a little bit more, which can be an indicator of some serratus anterior weakness, or even maybe some like rhomboid or maybe mid-trap weakness, because that's gonna help hold that down a little bit better. And that, in a sense, can be kind of like a scapular dyskinesis type position for it, like that abnormal movement of the shoulder, but it's just a little bit of weakness in that position. So doing some strength training for the serratus anterior is always helpful, whether that's like that push-up with the plus. Like if you're doing push-ups already, please just add the plus motion in.
Yeah, a lot of these things are kind of sneaky, and video is really good to see. So often it's like somebody will point it out or you'll kind of feel something, but you take a video and you're like, oh man, like there's an obvious difference between sides, or like somehow you're not doing what you think you are. Depending on how you do them, and in some cases whether this is more of like a muscular coordination thing or a weakness thing, a brief cycle of kind of like a sort of carefully cued wide grip pull-ups can actually kind of cure the same thing in a way that's potentially more directly applicable to climbing performance as well. I think it's less specific than some of the like push-up plus and like directly scapular type things, but it's something that allows you to train more or less exactly the movement that he's doing.
If you can do like 30 push-ups and you try and do the push-up plus and you get like 3 of them, you have a problem.
Absolutely, yeah.
This is Bubble Butt by Samuel. Or Sam, because
a story about this climb later. No.
But I just wanted to just show the comparison with that engagement of the scapula, because right off the bat, that left hand, we don't see that same protrusion, and then he actually, kind of cuts feet with this next move, and same thing, like, well, we're not gonna see that. We're gonna see like a muscle popping out, like, pretty strong guy, but we don't see that difference. Now again, like, I'm not extremely like nitpicky, like you're gonna get hurt if that's the case, because sometimes that's just the way the shoulder needs to move for that position,
or simply can. I mean, your body's elastic enough to train to so many things.
It's extremely adaptable.
It may bias you towards something. It's kind of more like if you had an issue, it's something to really look at. And if you don't have an issue, it's something to be aware of, but maybe not worry about too much.
Yeah, so like if you had a shoulder pain or an injury before, or if you're just like in tune but don't want to like stress, you're like, okay, I watch my videos all the time, I notice this is a problem, okay, maybe I'm gonna add some strengthening in for it. but you don't need to change your entire routine just for that one aspect. So that basically that scapula is staying nice and pressed up against the thorax, like the rib cage, the entire time. Like, so good stability in the shoulder keeps it in a nice strong position, potentially decreases some injury risk, especially going through those dynamic motions. So
Looks good. Yeah.
All
Well
right.
climbed.
Fear of the Black Hat by Jake from Badwater Bouldering.
What's up, Badwater folk?
This one just looks really cool. I mean, are they imagining we're maybe practicing a little bit on like a top rope, or what do you think that's for?
You
Dan?
know,
I'm not positive. That's what I'm asking. Maybe.
I'm gonna just let them be. No. I assume that they're cleaning it or rehearsing it or something.
Okay.
I get that it's a big boulder. I just can't help it. With a flat landing like that coming from Bicep, I don't see what the problem is.
Yeah, but this is coming from Dan the Bishop King. Wait, what did we say? The spirit of the buttermilks. The spirit of the buttermilks. That's right.
I mean, very much like safety first or third or fifth or whatever. But like, I think a lot of times trying something on a rope can increase confidence and let you proceed with a bit more awareness of what you're getting into. So it's realistically like a good, responsible way to go. But I think it's good to have some understanding of what your comfortable fall height is.
Yeah.
And that sort of requires that you take some kind of big falls. But that's something to be worked into.
Like, it depends on the
It
individual.
depends.
Like,
yeah.
if you know that like rehearsing those moves will make you super confident
Yeah.
and able to climb it, then that's a plus. If it's gonna mess with your head game and you're gonna get up there and freak out because you're no longer on the rope, then
It's one of those things that I think can both undermine your confidence because it makes it feel more imposing than it is, but it can also, I mean, and this is the bad side of both of them, it's like it can do just great things, but it can also give you an undue sense of confidence in dangerous positions. And so that's just kind of like, I have a lot of people ask me about sort of like
it depends.
fear control, mental game, like constraining risk, whatever. And that's a huge part of climbing, and there's a lot of different ways to do it. You need to take enough falls to be good at taking falls. However, you don't necessarily want to jump down every single time in the gym. That's just going to mess up like hips, knees, back. More than anything, it's like, don't deceive yourself about what the consequences might be and try to take appropriate steps to then kind of constrain the risk, Remember that this is right around a normal gym wall height.
All right, so this is Amanda on Monkey Trench, which is at the low start of Monkey Wrench.
Sweet, looks cool.
Yeah.
Little tunnel action.
I know. It's kind of fun. Like, there's lots of different movement and changes in direction, which is kind of neat with this, and she's got lots of good flexibility throughout it.
I like the balance of kind of like static climbing and a little bit of poppiness.
Yeah.
Seems like a lot of times people get too kind of habituated to one style or another, and either they just throw for everything or they climb unnecessarily statically and take too much strength to do things. So something that can be really useful analyzing your own videos is whenever you do a dynamic move, it can be like a little pop into a sloper or a jump or whatever. Generally speaking, you want there to be as little swing as possible. The thing to look for is sort of like the sag back. So if you overshoot or your body isn't in the right place, basically this like fallout happens because you didn't throw your body into the right line. And so that's just a small cue that you didn't do it perfectly. If it's hugely jarring, then that's definitely wrong. If it's a little bit of a fall, like, it's probably good enough. But if you have that sense of sloppy dynamics, that's kind of your body telling you that you didn't put your trunk into the right position. And so it's easy to see in videos, and you would like to kind of generate so that you move into the right line so that when you catch a hold, you basically just stop. If you overshoot or undershoot, you'll end up kind of falling away a little bit, and that's just something that's like very easy to see watching your own videos.
Dumas, this is Nat on Americana Exotica, or Natat. Nat. I thought this was just a neat climb because it's a lot of, the way they do it involves a lot of underclings.
It's a burly one.
It's pretty burly, and I think it's a great opportunity to talk about like compound movement strain that's strengthening that posterior chain. Because instead of just, relying on the arm, keep the legs engaged, keep the back engaged. So like that row or that example we talked about earlier, or this is even where like a deadlift comes into play. I think that this is just a really cool example of like how good tension throughout the body will help improve your success. And that sometimes if you're not great at that, I mean, yeah, you can train it on the wall, but that's where more compound, larger movement exercises come into play for off the wall training.
It's things like that where it's an attribute that you need that you can't quite regularly tax climbing that really kind of shouts for supplemental training.
Yeah, I love slower repetitions. I mean, slower is generally safer. Time under tension is very helpful for building for that training and muscle mass, and it allows you to have more time for feedback to understand what's engaged, what's not. It's not like he's doing this climb like max deadlift, max deadlift. So like in this sense, slowing that repetition down with a deadlift would actually be really helpful. Unless it's power, then you know, throw up the weight, whatever.
Strip it off the wall.
The next climb is Red Wave and Red Wave Low by Connor. Cool looking climb. Woo.
You can kind of see just because, you know, I like to harp on a couple of simple points and hopefully give different examples so that they make sense and get ingrained. But this is, again, like choosing which hand you're anchoring on, right? So he's a little bit biased towards the left hand here, as that's his primary generator. He hits this thing, which he's turned out on while he's still anchored on the left hand, but then immediately, swoop, rotates and he's back into that scapular plane on the right hand. And that's exactly how you want to do it. The time that I see people tend to fail the most here is they'll distract from the hold that they're controlling as they look towards their target hold, and they end up just making themselves much weaker with less tension between the points as they try to reach up. So a lot of times it's like, just make sure to keep this long enough to kind of get to this hold, at which point you transition, which is exactly what he did.
Cool. He can get it on the left, but on the lower start, he is unable to jump to that hold.
The differences come into the body position a lot. Now this is back to scapular and shoulder position. See here he's sagged out, everything's really nice, scapular planes set up great. Here he's already winging upward scapular rotation. And he's kind of in between, which you don't really want. He's not really engaged from a shoulder standpoint on either hand. See how he's kind of just floating between them? He's just like squared up. This is outright trying to pull through here, which is like not the strongest. And this is out here kind of winged, not the strongest. So I think that's probably realistically the big part, is he maybe wants a slightly higher right foot if such a thing exists, and he's just not gonna, like, this lets him suck his chest into the wall, but in a way that's gonna produce more swing. So you see how he's kind of hanging out here, he's closer to the plumb line, so he's going to be hitting the hold in a better line on the left one, and on the right he's just gonna be swinging out quite a bit. He's also square in both the shoulders and the hips here, meanwhile he's kind of drop kneed on the right foot here, and that's just gonna be another kind of harder position to jump through. There's gonna be a little bit more side to side swing. So I guess really in short, his shoulder is isolated in a somewhat disadvantaged position on the right side, and the way that he generates is just a little clunky and out of balance on the right one. Simple tweaks would be set that shoulder and open your hips up. That'll help, possibly a higher right foot also.
There you go. All right, this is Jorge on Sleepwalker. Here we go. Let's see what you got, Jorge. Oh, and he's down. All right. Well. Dan, any tips?
Obviously, just keep trying hard. This is one of those things that could benefit from wrist rows, deadlifts, bicep curls. Like, you just gotta isolate like really, really hard on that left hand so that you can keep enough force through the right hand to get any friction at all. If you're not just like really pressing into that thing, you're gonna dry fire.
If you guys are interested in getting some of this excellent coaching, Dan's probably full, but
I got like
he's expanding.
2 spots maybe, yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's expanding. He's got 2 spots.
Well, the nice thing is that even if the wait list is full, I do one-off consultations that are almost always available.
Okay.
They just have less background commitment. But they're probably the best bang for buck, realistically, because, you know, I don't want to get into like an ad here, but I can answer a lot of questions real quick.
Thanks to the wall for letting us shoot here as always, and let us know what you think about this format.
Like and subscribe.
That's right. Like and subscribe.